Chapter 274. The morning had arrived, and within the Western Mage Union, a minor uproar had broken out. The union leader, Michelin, was taken aback by the shocking news reported by Udir. The report claiming that during the night, 5 night visitors had infiltrated their stronghold. Afterward, upon seeing their beaten and bloodied figures bound up like fish, Michelin was rendered speechless. Could they be dead already? They are not dead, merely unconscious. But there wasn't that much blood before. They won't die from this amount of blood loss, so don't worry. Michelin cast a new look at Yidr, the man who had single-handedly caught all the night intruders. When they first met, he had found the young man's character surprisingly mature for his age. Although he had kept quiet and appeared kind-hearted, primarily focusing on helping the mages under his command, his nonchalant attitude while looking at the defeated intruders struck Michelin as odd. But what on earth was that dry, unbothered face in front of those tortured individuals? Even Michelin, who had become accustomed to surprises after experiencing all sorts of things, felt a chill down his spine upon witnessing Yidr's emotionless demeanor. So, you want me to find a place to detain them? Yes, I'm sorry to ask this of you, as these people have nothing to do with the Western Mage Union. However, we can't kill them right away. As soon as the rest of my group returns, we will decide what to do. In the meantime, you don't have to worry about watching over them. I will handle that. Yidr explained that these intruders were hired to disrupt a mission his group was performing. His demeanor while asking to borrow a holding place until his team could deal with the issues was so practiced. It seemed he had done this more than once or twice. The building next door could be used. Although it's partly damaged, the basement remains. It was originally used to store reagents, so it's sturdy, and the locking mechanism still works. That seems appropriate. Understood. Can I count on you to make sure they are not noticeable? We are just starting to recover some order, and it would be troublesome if this incident stirs up things again. Yes, that's the plan. Just as Michelin thought Yidr would immediately proceed, he paused in front of the unconscious group of 5. It seemed as though he was lost in thought. Watching his brooding expression, Michelin asked inquisitively, "Do you have anything else to say? May I ask you something related to a magic circle?" A magic circle? The idea of this young awakener whose life and learning experiences were completely unknown to Michelin asking about a magic circle intrigued him. Michelin felt a sense of pure curiosity and invited him to continue. Go ahead. I feel like I have seen some parts of a magic circle like this before, and I was wondering if you could recognize anything. Michelin looked at the piece of paper Yidr presented to him. The drawn shapes, albeit clumsy, contained familiar runes and magic activation words. They were sufficient for identification. This is an amplification circle developed by our Western Mage Union. Western Mage Union's amplification circle. As Yidr mumbled Michelin's words, his gaze sharpened. Are you sure? These characters here signify the beginning of a certain flow of magic power that our union member possess. And this part is the central activation word for the amplification circle. It's a phrase that needs to be written multiple times. Even if I only played a small part in the development of the circle, I would still recognize it, wouldn't I? But why do you ask this all of a sudden? Did you see this too when you went to the ruins with Lorna yesterday? Yidr replied slowly as he looked down at the characters Michelin pointed out. I dreamt about it last night and asked, but like you said, it seems like what I saw then is still imprinted in my mind. A dream? Huh. The youth's face, which had been spine chilling until a moment ago, began to feel somewhat human again. Michelin burst into laughter, stroking his rough ash colored beard. You have drawn it quite well for something you saw in a dream. These magic circles are incredibly hard to memorize and draw, taking quite some time to learn. If you can remember this much after only one viewing, then your visit to the ruins must have left quite an impression on you. Yes, it was impressive. Either folded the paper and put it back into his pocket. But may I ask one more thing? Could such a magic circle possibly be left on a monster's body? It was a somewhat odd question. However, among the mages obsessed with research, there were indeed those who did such things. So, Michelin didn't find it strange. A magic circle on a monster's body. It's possible for research purposes, but it's too much trouble. Instead of drawing the circle directly on the monster's bodies to cast magic, I would rather have them step onto an already prepared magic circle or initially find a monster that can absorb magic. It's much faster that way. I have heard of monsters that can absorb magic, but do they also absorb magic circles? If they can absorb magic that has already been formed by magic power, wouldn't they be able to absorb a magic circle with the same structure? Of course, I haven't tried it, but according to the records left by the Pearl Tower mages who created the Misty Wind Horse 450 years ago, Michelin enthusiastically quoted from past records to explain, but either couldn't understand any more of his words. After his fairy explanation, he thanked Michelin, wrapped the unconscious assassins in the power of the wind, and slipped outside. It was still early dawn, but thankfully Michelin was up early. Thanks to him, Either was able to quickly take care of the assassins and resolve his curiosity. He had just wanted to know if the magic circle from his dream really existed. But the answer he got was shockingly unexpected. It's not just any magic circle, but a part of the amplification circle created by the Western Mage Union. Was it really a coincidence that he saw the circle in his dream? It didn't feel right to dismiss it as a simple memory manifesting in his dream. In fact, it was quite a few pieces of information recalled in his dream. Information that Baphomet was first spotted near the Great Serene Forest, and even the vague memory of Kishir's ability. The moment he thought of Kishir in his dream, who had looked at him with twisted eyes, his stomach churned again. Despite trying to push the memory away, the dreams he had so far and the dream from last night kept intertwining in his mind, spinning thoughts like a mill. Suppose the dream Kishir, who chuckled while mumbling about breaking the vessel while collecting the red stone, was indeed real. Honestly, it was just not in his memory. But if he assumed that it was real, the fact that the strange attitude of the previous life's Kishir, who he couldn't understand, was mostly acceptable. He would have realized that several times already through his dreams. In any case, if all of that was indeed true, Kishir's condition from the viewpoint of the Western subjugation battle in his dream last night had certainly not been normal. He did not bring his divine sword, knowing fully well that his life was in danger on the battlefield, nor did he use swordsmanship, magic, or divine power. If this were the Kishir of this lifetime, he might have been concealing his power, but he certainly would not have refrained from using it even in dire situations. But if his condition was abnormal, why on earth had he gone to such lengths to kill Pethumet? Of course, thanks to his intervention, all the cavalry members, including Yidr, survived unscathed. But there was no benefit left for Kishir. He was no longer involved in the subjugation himself, and he began to be surrounded by even more malicious rumors than before. The past Yidr had not been particularly curious about why Kishir had done that. He would have guessed that Kishir had done it for some necessary reason, and he would have asked about it and probably been ignored, so he forgot about it. No matter how much he thought about it, the only conclusion was that the power Kishir showed at that time was akin to self-harm, and he couldn't guess the reason. Self-harm. Yidr repeated the word he thought of, furrowing his brow. If it were his past self, he would have thought that there was no word less suited to Kishir than that. But now he could not be so sure. The pale face that had appeared before him, tearing his own arm off just before he came to the west, was still vivid in his memory. Kishir was a man who could potentially make the choice to harm himself for somewhat irrational reasons. For somewhat irrational reasons. The face from his dream that exuded cold anger the moment he asked him to back off flickered in his mind. It certainly did not seem rational. His head started to hurt, so Yidr stopped walking for a moment and took a long breath. No, now is not the time to speculate. He had a duty to investigate other information he had heard from Miquelin. Yidr checked a few pieces of information he knew about the magic power-absorbing monster. I don't remember encountering any of the monsters I remember during the Western subjugation mission. What was Pethumet's group like in my past life? The one who resembled Pethumet was a nuisance to deal with in groups, but they were not particularly difficult to deal with. Since there were not many mages in the West capable of dealing with them, they were mostly dealt with early by the cavalry members and knights. At that time, hardly any mages came forward, so I don't remember whether the monsters had the property of absorbing magic power or not. It's difficult to remember this, given that I have dealt with more than a few monsters. But as he rubbed his forehead, trying to recall, one thing came back to him. He remembered receiving a report that crop damage had been quite severe due to Pethumet's group, who swarmed like locusts, destroying and consuming everything in their path.